there was a mysterious video that began circulating online called The Eyes of the Watcher. No one knew where it came from, but anyone who watched it quickly began to experience feelings of unease that crept over them. The abandoned house where the video was shot was a decrepit, dilapidated structure that seemed to have been untouched for decades. The paint on the walls was peeling, and the roof was caving in. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung off its hinges. The only signs of life were the overgrown weeds that had taken over the yard, and the thick layer of dust and cobwebs that covered every surface. As the camera made its way through the house, it revealed a series of disturbing and unsettling details. The dusty chandelier that hung from the ceiling had cobwebs covering it, suggesting that it had not been cleaned in years. The rickety rocking chair, which sat in the corner of the room, seemed to rock on its own, without any apparent cause. The boarded-up windows were covered in scratches, as if something had been trying to claw its way out. The camera slowly panned around the room. It lingered on certain objects that were both fascinating and terrifying. A series of dolls were in the room, each one more grotesque than the next. Their eyes seemed to follow you around the room, and their limbs were positioned in hideous and unnatural ways. Some of them were missing eyes, or limbs, others had strings coming out of their back, and all of them looked as if they had been pieced together from different dolls. The dolls seemed to be the focal point of the room, and their presence alone was enough to make anyone's skin crawl. The abandoned house was not just a physical space, but it was also permeated with a sense of malevolence and dread that seemed to be emanating from the very walls themselves. The atmosphere inside the house was heavy and oppressive, and it felt as if something was always lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting for its next victim. The overall feeling of the abandoned house was unsettling, and it's hard not to feel that something sinister had taken place there, and whatever evil had taken root in that house was still present and waiting to be unleashed. As the video went on, strange things began to happen. A door in the background would creak open, even though there was no one visible on the other side. Shadows would dart across the walls. And in the corner of the room, a figure began to take shape. It was a small, doll-like creature with button eyes and yarn hair. It stared directly into the camera, and its expression was one of malice and anger. It was almost as if the doll was watching the viewers back. After watching the video, those who were unfortunate enough to come across it found themselves unable to shake off the feeling that the dolls from the video were now somehow a part of their own reality. They felt like they were being watched even when they were alone, and the dolls seemed to be following them everywhere. They reported feeling a cold breath on the back of their necks, and a creeping feeling in their spines, as if something was constantly watching them, waiting for them to turn their back. Many people reported experiencing strange occurrences in their own homes after watching the video. They would hear strange noises, like the sound of footsteps coming from empty rooms, and whispers in the darkness. They would see shadows moving on the walls, even when the lights were on, and they would feel a sense of being watched even in the safety of their own homes. Some people reported having vivid nightmares, where they were trapped in the same room as the video, with the dolls looming over them. They would wake up drenched in sweat, feeling as if the dolls were still watching them. The dolls seemed to be following them into their dreams, taunting them and tormenting them. These experiences were not limited to the night time, as some reported that even during the day, the dolls seemed to be everywhere. They would see their grotesque features in the shadows, in reflections on mirrors, even in everyday objects like trees or the clouds. It was as if the dolls had infiltrated every aspect of their lives. As the video continued to spread and more people watched it, the number of reports of strange occurrences and terrifying experiences grew. For some individuals, the fear and paranoia caused by the dolls became too much to bear. They became consumed by their fear, and their minds slowly began to unravel. Some people became so paranoid that they refused to leave their homes, or even their rooms, for fear of encountering the dolls. They would barricade themselves inside, covering the windows and doors with blankets, and only venturing out to get essentials. They became reclusive, cutting themselves off from friends, family, and even the outside world. Others were unable to shake off the feeling of being watched, even in the safety of their own homes. They would constantly look over their shoulders, checking corners and closets, even under the bed, in a futile effort to escape the dolls. They would spend most of their days and nights in a state of high alert, with their nerves on edge. This constant state of anxiety and fear would eventually lead to severe anxiety and depression, rendering them unable to function normally. For some, the dolls had become an obsession, and their minds became consumed by them. They would spend all their time researching the video, trying to find a way to escape the dolls, but their efforts were futile. They would carve dolls on everything, from notebooks to walls, and would talk to them as if they were alive. The dolls had taken over their minds and souls, and they were unable to escape the grip of their obsession. In some extreme cases, the individuals driven to madness would eventually disappear, and it is believed that the dolls had claimed them as their own. Some say that the video was cursed, and that it would bring ruin to those who dared to watch it. Others believe that it was a portal to an alternate dimension, where the dolls were alive, and they were coming to claim their own. But no one knew for sure. As investigations into the Eyes of the Watcher video continued, the investigators were determined to find out who had created it and why. As the days passed, some investigators found that the video was recorded by a young girl who had gone missing a few years ago along with her family, who lived in that same abandoned house. Further investigation revealed that the girl was obsessed with dolls, and had even created her own. She had been experimenting with the supernatural, trying to bring the dolls to life. But something went wrong, and her experiments had opened some kind of otherworldly connection. The dolls were not only alive, but they were also intelligent and malevolent. They had taken over the girl and her family, and now were after anyone who dared to watch the video. But there was a twist in the story. The girl's family had not gone missing, but instead, they had been murdered by the girl herself, in a fit of madness caused by her obsession with the dolls. She even used the remains of her own family to make new dolls. These new dolls were a manifestation of her guilt, and the video was a message, a confession. Investigators also scoured the internet for any clues or leads, and they eventually stumbled upon a series of online posts and videos made by the young girl. As they dug deeper, they discovered more confirmation that the girl had been dabbling in the occult and had been using her dolls as a conduit for her supernatural experiments. She had been documenting her progress online, and it was clear that she had become obsessed with her work. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that something had gone wrong with her experiments, and she had lost control of her creations. As the young girl experimented with her dolls and the supernatural, she began to notice strange changes in their behavior. At first, it was just small things, like the dolls moving on their own, or their eyes seeming to follow her around the room. She brushed it off as her imagination playing tricks on her, but as time passed, the occurrences became more frequent and more pronounced. The girl started to notice that the dolls were coming to life in small ways, moving on their own, opening their eyes and changing their positions. She would often catch glimpses of the dolls out of the corner of her eye, and when she would turn to look, they would be back in their original positions. These small movements were unnerving, and the girl felt as if the dolls were watching her. As her experiments continued, the dolls began to exhibit more advanced behaviors. They would speak in strange, ethereal voices, and they would answer the girl's questions with cryptic responses. They would even move around the room on their own, often leaving the girl feeling as if she was being followed. The girl's room was slowly becoming a place of dread. The doll's movements and behavior began to change and become more aggressive. Their limbs would move as if trying to reach for her, and their eyes would follow her every move. The girl was becoming increasingly paranoid. The girl's diary, later found by the investigators, also describes how the dolls seemed to be alive and had their own will. She wrote about how their dolls would appear in her dreams, haunting her, and she felt that they were getting closer and closer to their ultimate goal of possessing her mind, body, and soul. The girl was consumed by the fear of the dolls and had been unable to escape their grip and was eventually claimed by them. The girl's online presence revealed that she had been struggling with her creations for some time. Eventually, the girl had stopped posting online and disappeared from the internet along with her family, where, shortly after, she murdered them. Inside they found the remains of the girl and her family. That's also where they originally found the diary. Her notes revealed that the girl had been trying to find a way to stop the dolls, but in the end, they had taken control of her and her family, and used them as a means of drawing in unsuspecting victims, who they could claim as their own. The dolls were a manifestation of her guilt, and the video was a message, a confession. The true nature of the video was a shocking revelation, and it sent chills down the spine of those who had watched it. The girl's descent into madness had been captured on film, and now, it was out in the world for everyone to see. The video was eventually banned and removed from all platforms, and the house was burned down, but the memory of it lingers on as a grim reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the mind. The efforts to censor the video were ultimately futile, as copies of it continued to surface online. Despite the censorship efforts, the video found its way to the dark corners of the internet, passed around like a virus. It was said that those who had watched the video could not unsee it, and were haunted by the memory of it. Many who had seen the video felt compelled to share it with others. There was something deeper, something more sinister to the video than just a recording of a mad girl and her dolls. It was said that the dolls themselves were behind the spreading of the video. They had found a way to manipulate the memories of those who watched the video, making them believe that they had shared it voluntarily. It was their way of finding new victims, new puppets to pull the strings of. Those who had the misfortune to watch the video reported to see things in the corner of their eyes, even when the lights were on. They heard whispers in the silence of the night and footsteps when no one was there. They were being watched, stalked, by the dolls. It was as if they were alive and had taken an interest in them. It was warned that the dolls would not rest until they had claimed every single one of those who had dared to watch the video. And they would stop at nothing to make sure that their message, their confession, was heard by the whole world. It was said that if you ever come across the video, don't watch it. For once you do, there's no going back. The dolls will be watching, waiting for their next victim to fall into their trap. And they will stop at nothing to claim you as their own.